This game is tasty. We've got a bit of drama on the board, a twist at the end, arbiter involved, and then we've got some off the board stuff kicking off via Twitter. Jan Nepomniachtchi, stick with this one because there's lots to come here. Now, Magnus Carlsen is playing with black. His opponent, the young Iranian Parham Magsudlu. Can he rock Magnus in the defense of this world rapid title, which Magnus holds? It's round 4. They're playing in Uzbekistan, an ancient city called Samarkand, rooted in chess as well. Have a Google of that one if you haven't done already. Magnus with black here. Can he stir things up? So we get c4, e6 from Magnus, knight f3, and we're now back into a queen's gambit declined. Boo, boring, right? Well, how is Magnus Carlsen going to mix this one up? He starts with c5, fighting for the centre. Now we're following a line which he debated with Fabiano Caruana in 2018 World Championship match, but Magnus on the white side. So he knows this stuff well. He develops the knight, queen c2, rook e8, eyeballs this king. Now rook d1, eyeballs the queen. But Magnus, not afraid, expands in the centre. This is well-known theory. The bishop jumps to g5, and now d4. More aggressive pawn pushing. Is this premature? You know, the rook's opposite the queen. Well, you can get away with it because the king's also opposite the rook. So the knight jumps to d5, doesn't start opening the e-file. There's huge pressure on f6. Bishop drops back. We now get an exchange. This one recaptures, and after bishop d3, Magnus has got to compromise the pawn structure. This one attacked, so g6 played. Now the knight chops off that bishop, which could get dangerous later. Queen recaptures. Bishop e4, one of the top moves. Parham well prepared. He wants to get castled, and now Magnus mixes things up. Top move here is bishop g4, but Magnus goes bishop f5, and he's allowing his pawn structure to be wrecked. The computer actually wants to castle immediately here. Sure, black can take, queen recaptures, but you can't actually open the e-file for the rook. But we see takes. Pawn recaptures, and now Magnus has got some pressure. You know, if you try and castle, well, look at this clump of pawns. d3 is actually the tricky move. If queen or rook capture, then you walk into e4. And after the queen moves, well, at some point, e4 is coming. Even if you first have to protect the queen there, you know, deal with that x-ray threat. But okay, we didn't see castles. This is the problem. So e takes on d4 played. Magnus goes with the knight here. He could also capture with the pawn, but this is a good move. And now white has to take this one off the board. Although you open the e-file, the king is checked. It sidesteps. Well, okay, white is holding on. Rook e4, black's in the driving seat, but this is a lot better than what we see in the game. Because what is played is queen to c3, but now rook a d8, and there's huge problems getting this king to safety. For example, if you now castle, well, you're walking straight into this fork, and you lose your queen after the king moves from the check. So that's not possible. Rook d2 therefore played to cover this threat, prepare castling, but now queen g6. There's a new problem. If you castle, whoops, bit of lag there. Now you take with check, queen recaptures, and your rook drops at the end of the line. White is in trouble. So king f1 played. Ugly move. Pawn f4 now from Magnus. He opens the queen to check on b1. Excuse me. And if you now take here, well, this is the problem. This is what f4's opened up. You can check from here and you're not actually able to block. Where's the king going? Well, to the e-file. Then you check and you open the rook and you win the queen. Obviously, it's completely game over. So, no takes on d4. The knight stumbles back to e1. That is miserable. And now queen a6. Magnus switching. Nice geometry. X-rays the king, plus the weak c-pawn. We get h4 from Magsudlu. Desperate stuff to activate this rook. Rook c8 targets the weak pawn, b3 but b5, and look at the clocks. Magnus 5 minutes up here. King g1 comes away from this queen's x-ray, now takes, the pawn is ditched, there's nothing that could be done. This knight is too much of a monster. Queen h3 now played, potentially looking for a check, run the h-pawn down, that kind of thing, and Magnus plays such a Magnus move here. You know, he could keep these queens on, centralise with queen d6, but queen e6 played, offering an exchange, so typical of his style. We get king h2, these ones are lopped off the board, king recaptures, and e4 from Magnus, and he's seen that he's still got this advantage with that central clump of pieces, despite the queens coming off, these ones coming like space invaders, and now Parham goes pawn f3, an ugly looking move to give Magnus this connected pass pawn, but this rook was stuck. Couldn't enter the game while the knight was there, and the knight was stuck. It had no squares to jump to, so at least by forcing this pawn forward now, the knight can come to d3. We get h5 from Magnus, keeping an eye on any king marches from white. Knight d3, the plan completed, Parham low on the clock here, and now e2 from Magnus. He ignores the attack on this pawn for now. The rook slides across, and Magnus could go rook e3 here. It's a great move. If white captures here, black captures here, opens the attack. There's these kind of threats in the air as well. Black's doing great. But Magnus didn't do this one. He went rook c3. He thinks he's seen a win, but he's miscalculated because the pawn was taken. Magnus goes knight c2. He's looking to promote. Yes, there's knight d5. He's seen this, but he's surely thinking, or must have been, that rook c5 is just winning for him. The knight's got to move somewhere. Then you push this pawn forward. You're going to win one of those rooks. But there's a problem with this whole line. If the king was on g7, say, then black is killing it. But it's not. So you can throw in this check. King goes, you pick up the rook, and this is just a level game. White even marginally better. The square's now well covered. There are problems. So Magnus has to go rook c6, cover this square, and the game is just level. The evaluation bar shows it. Magnus has completely messed it up. Now knight b4 comes, hits rook, hits this knight here. So Magnus takes on a3. We get this exchange of rooks, and here's the kicker. Yes, the pawn goes through, the rook gives up, but white wins this pawn, and look at this position. This is just a theoretical draw. We reach this moment here where the pawn structure gets fixed with pawn g3, and Magnus now has 50 moves to try and win this game, because if he keeps thrashing away for more than 50 moves, his opponent can claim a draw. That's the 50 move rule. So there can't be any captures or pawn pushes, otherwise then the 50 moves resets. So okay, king d5, Magnus is going to try here. Now we're obviously going to whiz through these moves because it goes on a while, but there is a twist. The arbiter is called. Now at the minute, Parham's doing a nice job of just rotating on these outpost squares, e5 and g5. If Magnus tries to get into this g-pawn, well, the king covers it. He can't make progress. So Magnus thrashes, but we get to a position in just a moment. Here, Parham's actually got decent time on the clock, but when Magnus attacks this knight here with rook a7, Parham just has this moment of madness, doesn't jump to the outpost here or here, which should keep the equality, but he goes to d6, and there's a problem. Rook d7 hits the knight, but it also stops it retreating to f7, where it can then carry on this circuit. Suddenly, the knight is stumbling short of an outpost square. The rook starts boxing it in. You're going to see a great example of that after this move. That knight has got no jumps now unless it comes to this c7 square. So the king shuffles. Magnus starts marching in. You give Magnus one more move, the knight's boxed. So it jumps out to c7 here. King c6, the knight comes this way. There's variations on this theme, right? But the knight's running out of squares however you slice and dice it. Rook d6, re-entering the game. Now we get king e3 played, but what if you go here, for example? Check. Try and run the knight out. Well, then there's king c5, and look at the problem. If you come back here, rook takes. If you come here or here, you run into rook d2 check, winning the knight. This is the problem. If you come here, of course, the rook just takes. So the knight is lost. That's why king e3, there's no longer these rook d2 check ideas, but there's new problems. King b5 played, the knight comes this way, and now king b6. Now the knight retreats to the corner, but if it comes here, you've still got problems with the position of that king. Many variations, but all roads lead to Rome. The knight is lost once it leaves these outposts. So Parham goes this way, king b7 from Magnus. He offers his hand to accept the resignation from Parham, but wait, look, Parham's not given the hand. He wants to check something. Has it been 50 moves since Magnus fixed the pawn structure with Parham? You know, can he claim a draw? Arbiters involved, they're checking. It's more tense than the Super Bowl up in here. Okay, they find out it's been 39 moves. Magnus can claim the win. Parham resigns. That is game over. So Magnus does well. We've got the standings to come in just a minute. But first, to the off-the-board drama here. So Jan Nepomniachtchi tweeted this. Magnus has had access to a laptop between games so he can check some stuff. You know, he's got a personal space, but not all players do. So what they're basically saying is we want equality for all players here. You know, why is one getting one thing? Why not another? Which I definitely understand. What I don't know here is the context of the situation, right? What's the reason for that? Why is it all set up in that way? Yada, yada, yada. Either way, it's drama, right? We're going to enjoy how this thing evolves and rumbles on. MVL, Fabi, they all retweeted it as well. So it's not just Jan feeling this way. Anyway, interesting first day. I'll try and get a couple games up each day now. So much chess to come. I hope you enjoyed. Check out the video on screen for another epic game of chess. And I hope to see you again soon. Cheers.